rejoice and be glad. Hallelujah. God is still in control. He's in control. Even when I think I'm having a bad day, God is still in control. I have to say that because some things are not going our way all the time. God is still in control. Hallelujah. Yes, Lord. First Kings chapter 1, verse number 1. Now King David was old and stricken in years, and they covered him with clothes, but he got no heat. Verse 5. Then Adonijah, the son of Haggith, exalted himself. Then Adonijah, the son of Haggith, exalted himself, said, I will be king. And he prepared him chariots and horsemen and 50 men to run before him. Verse number 9. And Adonijah slew sheep and oxen and fat cattle by the stone of Zophim, which was in Eroah, and called all his brother the king's son and all the men of Judah and the king's servant. He called all his brethren except Solomon. Verse 17. And Bathsheba came to David and said unto him, My Lord, thou swearest by the Lord thy God unto thy handmaid, saying, Assuredly Solomon thy son shall reign after me, and he shall sit upon my throne. Verse 18. And now behold, Adonijah reigneth, and now my Lord the king, thou knowest it not. And he had slain oxen and fat cattle and sheep in abundance, and had called all the sons of the kings, and Abiathar the priest, and Joab, and the captain of hosts. But Solomon thy servant had he not called. Verse 33. And David also said unto them, Take with you the servants of your Lord, and cause Solomon my son to ride upon my mule, my own mule, and bring him down to Gihon. And let Zadok the priest and Nathan the prophet anoint him their king over Israel, and blow ye with the trumpet, and say, God save Solomon. Last verse 35. Then ye shall come up after him, that he may come and sit upon my throne, for he shall be king in my stead. And I have appointed him to be ruler over Israel and over Judah. Notice in the text, Adonijah being the oldest son, the word of the Lord is blessed. Thank you. Notice Adonijah being the eldest son, and his daddy is on his deathbed. He feels like he's going to be the next king. Scripture tells us that David was getting cold and he couldn't get no heat. We didn't read every verse, but they brought in a young woman and thought maybe the young girl could warm him up. And if that don't do it, then he should have died. Because everybody know David had a lust problem. So if he didn't acknowledge the young lady, he was should have died. Word got back to his son that he was dying. And because he was dying, Adonijah, this eldest son, decided, I'll exalt myself. And scripture says, but he exalted himself to be king. However, David chose Solomon to be king. Tradition says that the oldest son, man's tradition, or at least Jewish custom, says that the oldest son gets the worthy portion of the father's earning. And if the father is a king, he deserves the right to the throne. But how many of you know man's tradition don't line up with God's will? God has never honored man's tradition. Tradition don't line up with the will of God, because it was the oldest son in David's house by the name of Amnon, which was the oldest son, but he was murdered because he raped his sister. And because he raped his sister, his brother Absalom, which was the third son, killed Amnon. And how many know the Bible is right? Whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he also reap. And because Absalom, being the third son, now the oldest son, murdered his brother, he had to reap what he sown. He murdered, so therefore he had to be murdered. And that leaves us with this fourth son by the name of Ananias, which is the fourth living son. But there was a second son, but he died at a very early age because David's house was cursed. And David's house was cursed because of the sin and crime David did against Uriah and Bathsheba. And God promised him that the sword would never leave your house. See, when you do things, you think you hurt nobody but you. But David hurt his entire house. He cursed his children and his children's children. And the Bible said, I'll visit the sins on the fathers to their children, even to the third and fourth generation of them that hate me. What you do nowadays is going to determine what your grandchildren and great-grandchildren have to go through. Do I have a witness here? I haven't forgot my subject. But notice here now, in the text, Ananias was going out on tradition. In other words, what Ananias was saying is, it's my turn now. Absalom had his, Amnon had his, second brother didn't make it. Now is my turn. Amnon was going on turn, but Solomon was going on time. For a subject I want to use very quickly, just because it's your turn doesn't mean it's your time. I can't use nobody. I don't care because you feel you next in line. If it's not your time, quiet in here this morning. Let me talk to some folk that felt like you got passed over. Maybe it wasn't your time. Now, the text starts out, Ananias was banking on tradition. And tradition usually, watch this now, tradition is something that is given by men, or given by man. Do I have a witness here? But saints of God, when is your time? When is your time is linked with a promise. A promise is something that favored by God. Look at your neighbor before we go any further and tell them, don't stand on tradition, stand on the promise.